the NFL world just got hit with an earthquake. Not a rumor, not some wild fan theory, but a straight-up jaw-dropping revelation that has every analyst, every insider, and every fan shaking their head in disbelief. We're talking about the Baltimore Ravens, one of the most stable, respected organizations in the league, reportedly putting a $400 million development opportunity on the table for Shedeur Sanders. And get this, Coach Prime and his son said no. Yeah, you heard that right. A young quarterback, fresh out of college, staring down the kind of money and mentorship that could change a career forever, and he walked away. Or more accurately, his family walked away. The entire league is asking the same question right now. Who in the world turns down that kind of offer? Think about it. The Ravens already have Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP, one of the most electrifying quarterbacks to ever lace them up, and a player who completely reshaped how defenses think about dual-threat QBs. The offer wasn't about taking Lamar's job tomorrow. It was about learning, developing, and eventually being ready when the window opened. For Shedeur, that could have been the perfect path. No pressure to start immediately, but all the tools, coaching, and experience to become the guy when the time was right. But Deion Sanders, prime time himself, didn't see it that way. In his mind, his son wasn't built to sit. He wasn't built to be a guy. He was built to be the guy. And when the phone call came, when the Ravens made it clear they wanted Shedeur in purple and black, the Sanders family said no thanks. Now here, where things get really wild. This isn't just about money. This isn't just about football. This decision cuts to the core of what it means to build a career in the NFL today versus back in Deion's era. It's about pride, about legacy, and about whether chasing the starting spot immediately is worth more than patiently preparing for it. Because history tells us, over and over again, that sometimes the players who wait become the ones who win. Still, imagine the optics. A young QB saying he didn't want to sit behind Lamar Jackson. Let that sink in. Not just any quarterback, but one of the most dynamic players in NFL history. It almost sounds arrogant, right? But to Prime, it was simply confidence. To him, why should his son settle for being a backup when he could be a starter somewhere else? That competitive edge, that belief, that refusal to play second fiddle, it's the very mindset that made Deion Sanders a Hall of Famer in two different sports. But here's the million-dollar question. Does that same mindset help or hurt Shedeur in 2024? That's the debate tearing the football world apart right now. Some say it's the boldest move a young quarterback could make, protecting his shot at being the face of a franchise. Others say it's a career-killing mistake, a missed opportunity to learn from greatness that might never come again. And the craziest part, we're just scratching the surface of this story. When word first broke that the Ravens had dangled a $400 million development plan in front of Shedeur Sanders, the NFL community didn't just raise eyebrows, they nearly fell out of their seats. $400 million. That's not just life-changing money, that's generational wealth, the kind of deal that cements a quarterback as the face of a franchise for decades. And it wasn't just about the number itself. It was about who was making the offer and why. The Ravens aren't a desperate team looking for a quick fix. They're one of the league's most respected organizations, with a Super Bowl pedigree, Hall of Fame executives like Ozzie Newsome pulling strings, and a reputation for turning raw talent into polished stars. When Baltimore calls you on draft day, it's not small talk. It means they see something in you, something worth investing in. And in Shedeur's case, they didn't just want him in the building. They were ready to commit massive resources to his development. Think about what that really means. Most rookies come into the NFL scratching and clawing for a roster spot, maybe fighting for a backup role, praying for a chance to even step onto the field. But Shedeur had the rarest of opportunities, to be handpicked by one of the most stable franchises in football, to sit behind a two-time MVP, and to learn every single day in a system designed to maximize quarterbacks. That's not just a job offer, that's a golden ticket. And yet, when Deion recounted the story, he did it almost casually. Sitting there in an interview, he dropped the bomb like it was just another phone call. Yeah, Baltimore reached out. Ozzie wanted to talk to Shedeur. I put him on the phone. Just like that. No build-up, no dramatics, just matter of fact. But buried in that calm delivery was a revelation that rattled the NFL to its core. Because if Baltimore was ready to make that kind of commitment, and the Sanders family turned it down, then we're talking about one of the boldest rejections in modern draft history. To some, it looked like confidence. To others, arrogance. But one thing was certain: the decision sent shockwaves through the league. Coaches, scouts, and players all started asking the same question. If you're willing to walk away from Baltimore, what exactly are you looking for? And that's where this story takes its first twist, because the answer wasn't about money. It was about mindset. The obvious question hanging over this entire saga is simple. Why in the world would anyone say no to $400 million and a chance to learn under one of the most successful franchises in the NFL? On the surface, it sounds insane. For most young quarterbacks, this would be the dream scenario. But for Shedeur Sanders and his father, Deion, Coach Prime Sanders, the decision was never about money. It was about identity, control, and the belief that Shedeur's path to greatness couldn't be written by anyone else. Let's start with the Sanders mindset. Deion has built his career and now his coaching empire on refusing to be ordinary. He didn't just play football, he played football and baseball at the highest level. He didn't just talk trash, he backed it up every Sunday. His entire brand was built on confidence, swagger, and the refusal to take a back seat to anyone. Now, as a coach and father, he's instilled that same fire into Shedeur. To them, the Ravens weren't offering an opportunity, they were offering a compromise. Sit, wait, develop, and maybe one day you'll get your shot. But for Prime, his son's shot wasn't someday. It was now. From Shedeur's perspective, accepting Baltimore's offer would have meant stepping into Lamar Jackson's shadow. And let's be real, that's not a small shadow. Lamar is already a legend in Baltimore, a two-time MVP, a player who has redefined what a modern quarterback looks like. Even if Shedeur played perfectly in practice, the spotlight would never fully be his. To the Sanders family, that wasn't acceptable. They wanted Shedeur to be a franchise's future, not an understudy. And here's the thing, this isn't just arrogance. There's strategy in the madness. Look at recent NFL history. Quarterbacks who sat behind stars often found themselves stuck. Think Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers or Trey Lance behind Jimmy Garoppolo. In both cases, years of development turned into wasted time, and the window to prove themselves shrank. By the time they finally got a chance, expectations were sky high, and the patience was gone. For Deion and Shedeur, the lesson was clear. Waiting is dangerous. If you're going to make mistakes, make them early, when teams are still invested in you. Then there's the branding factor. Shedeur isn't just an athlete, he's a marketable name, a quarterback raised under the spotlight of Deion Sanders' larger-than-life persona. Sitting on the bench doesn't build a brand. Starting, making headlines, and proving doubters wrong does. Every snap he takes isn't just about football, it's about business. And turning down Baltimore wasn't just a football decision. It was a calculated move to protect Shedeur's brand as a starter, not a backup. Still, make no mistake, this decision came with risk. Saying no to the Ravens didn't just burn one bridge, it made the entire NFL take notice. Scouts started whispering about entitlement. Executives questioned whether Shedeur and his camp truly understood how rare that opportunity was. Confidence can be respected, but it can also look like arrogance when the stakes are this high. So why say no? Because to the Sanders family, greatness doesn't wait its turn. It takes its turn. They weren't interested in a future where Shedeur was maybe the guy. They wanted a future where he was the guy from day one. And in making that choice, they didn't just pass on a $400 million offer. They lit a fire under the league and raised the stakes for Shedeur's career higher than ever. Every legendary athlete, every household name in sports, has followed some kind of blueprint. It's not always obvious in the moment, but when you look back at their careers, patterns emerge. There's the risk-taking, the stubborn belief in themselves, and the decision to carve a lane that nobody else dared to walk. And in many ways, Shedeur Sanders' choice to reject Baltimore's massive offer is straight out of that same playbook. Think about Kobe Bryant in the late 1990s. He could have played it safe, stayed in Charlotte after being drafted, and worked his way into a rotation role. Instead, he fought to land in Los Angeles, where he could build his legend alongside the Lakers. Or look at Tom Brady, not the decision of where to start, but how he transformed every slight and every doubt into fuel. His story wasn't about being chosen. It was about forcing the NFL to regret overlooking him. These legends had one thing in common. They didn't accept the roles others tried to assign them. They made their own. Shedeur's rejection of the Ravens has that same energy. He wasn't content being the next man up behind Lamar Jackson. That wouldn't fit the blueprint of greatness. Legends don't shadow other legends. They create their own light. And that's exactly what Shedeur and Deion are trying to engineer. A career path where Shedeur isn't introduced as Lamar's backup, but as the face of a franchise from day one. But here, where the blueprint gets even more interesting, Deion himself has lived this script. Prime never allowed himself to be just another cornerback. He branded himself as Prime Time, a name that still rings louder than almost anyone from his era. He leveraged style, flair, and confidence to build a persona that transcended the game. Now, he's instilling that same philosophy into Shedeur. If you want to be remembered, you can't follow the rules written for everyone else. You have to rewrite them. That's the deeper meaning of turning down $400 million. It wasn't just about football, it was about storytelling. Legends are remembered not only for their stats, but for the way their stories are told. Michael Jordan wasn't just the best scorer. He was the player who got cut from his high school team and came back to dominate the world. LeBron James wasn't just an all-time great. He was the chosen one who carried the weight of a city at 18. Shedeur Sanders. His story is being built right now. The quarterback bold enough to say no to the safe route, chasing not money, but legacy. Of course, the blueprint of legends isn't all glamour. It's filled with risk. For every Kobe or MJ, there are countless athletes who gambled big and fell into obscurity. The Sanders family knows this, but they're betting that the story they're writing will put Shedeur in the same conversations as the greats, not the forgotten. And if the plan works, people won't talk about the $400 million he passed on. They'll talk about the dynasty he built by daring to bet on himself. For all the confidence, for all the swagger, draft day has a way of humbling even the boldest athletes. The cameras, the endless speculation, the split-second reactions, everything is magnified. And when Shedeur Sanders walked into draft season after rejecting Baltimore's $400 million offer, the spotlight on him was hotter than ever. Every analyst had an opinion. Some said he was brilliant, betting on himself and setting the stage to be the face of a franchise. Others said he was reckless, throwing away generational wealth for ego. But one thing was clear: draft day would be the ultimate reality check. As teams prepared their boards, whispers started spreading in league circles. Executives questioned not just Shedeur's talent, but his mindset. Was he truly NFL ready, or was this a case of a family brand trying to outsmart the system? For teams with top picks, the debate became louder. Take a chance on a quarterback with undeniable talent but major baggage, or pass and avoid the media circus. The irony is, Shedeur's talent wasn't the issue. On tape, he had everything: poise, accuracy, football IQ, leadership. What made scouts nervous was the idea that he and his camp could walk into an organization and demand things their way. That fear wasn't just about locker room chemistry, it was about control. NFL front offices don't like giving up power, and the Sanders brand made it clear they weren't going to settle for business as usual. Draft day itself unfolded like a drama. Fans expected Shedeur's name to be called early, maybe even top 5. But as pick after pick came and went, something became obvious. Teams were hesitant. Every selection before his felt like a message. Other quarterbacks with less star power but safer reputations went ahead of him. And with each slide down the board, the cameras cut to Shedeur, calm on the outside, but everyone watching knew the pressure was suffocating. For a young man who turned down $400 million to prove he was more than just a backup, the wait was brutal. This was the NFL's way of reminding him, you don't control the draft, we do. When his name was finally called, the reaction was electric, but the placement mattered. He wasn't going to a juggernaut, he wasn't going to a team with a championship window wide open. He was going to a franchise in need of rebuilding, a team willing to roll the dice on not just his talent, but his confidence. The message was clear: prove yourself here, or the narrative flips instantly from future legend to overhyped risk. That's the harsh reality of draft day. One decision, like turning down the Ravens, can change everything. Instead of being the highest-paid backup in league history, Shedeur entered the NFL as a starter in waiting for a struggling franchise. The pressure doubled, the spotlight grew, and the margin for error vanished. Because from this moment forward, every snap, every throw, and every mistake would be judged against the $400 million opportunity he left behind. When people look back at Shedeur Sanders' shocking decision, the first question is always the same. What exactly did he give up by walking away from Baltimore? Because this wasn't just about a paycheck, it was about what the Ravens could have provided beyond the money. First and foremost, there was stability. The Ravens are one of the NFL's most consistent franchises. From front office leadership to coaching culture, they've built a reputation for doing things the right way. Few teams offer a young quarterback the chance to grow in a system known for patience, structure, and long-term success. For Shedeur, Baltimore would have been a safe harbor, a place to learn under Lamar Jackson without the immediate pressure of carrying a franchise on his shoulders. Then there's the mentorship factor. Love him or hate him, Lamar Jackson is a generational quarterback. Training beside him, watching his preparation, and absorbing the way he handles pressure would have been priceless. Shedeur could have sharpened his skills without the weekly burden of headlines and critics. Instead of being thrown into the fire, he would have been forged slowly, in an environment that protects young talent better than most. And let's not forget the financial side. $400 million isn't just generational wealth, it's empire-building money. That kind of contract secures not just your future, but your children's children. Combined with endorsements that would have skyrocketed in a market like Baltimore, Shedeur could have cemented himself as one of the richest athletes before ever becoming a full-time starter. There's also the championship window. Baltimore isn't rebuilding. They're contenders. A few years under Lamar could have positioned Shedeur perfectly to take the reins of a playoff-ready roster. Imagine stepping into an offense stacked with weapons, a defense known for dominance, and a culture accustomed to winning. For most quarterbacks, that's the dream scenario. But Shedeur and Deion saw it differently. To them, all of these pros came with one massive con: waiting. Sitting on the bench, no matter how glamorous the situation, didn't fit their vision. The Ravens could have given him wealth, mentorship, and stability, but what they couldn't give him was ownership of his story. And for the Sanders family, that was the deciding factor.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button.
To understand why Shedeur Sanders made the choices he did, you can't just look at him. You have to look at the man who raised him. Because behind every headline, every bold move, and every risk Shedeur takes, there's one unshakable influence: Deion Sanders, the living embodiment of prime time. Deion wasn't just a great athlete, he was a cultural force. He was flash before flash was accepted. He was confidence before confidence became branding. From the way he dressed to the way he celebrated, every move screamed you're watching a star. And when he stepped on the field, he backed it up with talent so undeniable that critics were forced to respect him. That mentality, call it swagger, call it defiance, call it prime time, has been handed down to Shedeur like a family heirloom. So when Shedeur said no to Baltimore's $400 million offer, it wasn't just a business decision. It was a statement of belief, rooted in Prime's playbook. Deion has always preached that you don't wait for opportunities, you create them. You don't ask to be noticed, you demand it. Sitting behind Lamar Jackson didn't fit that philosophy. Accepting that role would have meant stepping out of the primetime spotlight, and in this family, that's simply not an option. The primetime mentality is bigger than football. It's a way of life. It's about betting on yourself when everyone else thinks you're crazy. It's about carrying yourself like a star long before the world recognizes you as one. That's what Deion did when he entered the NFL, and it's what Shedeur is doing now as he fights to carve his name into history. But here's the catch. The primetime mentality cuts both ways. On one side, it creates legends. It produces athletes who redefine positions, inspire generations, and leave behind stories that live forever. On the other side, it paints a target. When you live loud, when you demand attention, critics root for your downfall. Every mistake gets magnified, every stumble gets replayed, and every loss becomes ammunition. Shedeur inherited not just the confidence, but the pressure that comes with it. And yet, that's exactly what makes this mentality so powerful. Shedeur doesn't shy away from the spotlight. He embraces it. Pressure, to him, isn't a burden. It's fuel. It's the same philosophy that made Deion the most electrifying cornerback of all time, and it's the same fire that drives Shedeur to chase a path no one else would dare take. At its core, the prime time mentality is about rewriting the rules. It's about refusing to be ordinary, even when the safe path guarantees success. For Shedeur, that meant turning down comfort and security in pursuit of legacy. It's dangerous. It's controversial. But if it pays off, it's the exact kind of story prime time was built for. Because legends aren't remembered for playing it safe. They're remembered for betting everything on themselves. What happened with Shedeur and the Ravens isn't just about X's and O's. It's not just about depth charts, contracts, or whether he could learn behind Lamar Jackson. This decision speaks to something far bigger: identity, legacy, and the way athletes today are redefining what it means to control their own path. For Deion and Shedeur Sanders, football has never been just football. It's a platform. It's a vehicle for family pride, for cultural representation, and for changing the rules of the game, literally and figuratively. When Prime turned Jackson State into a national spotlight, he wasn't just coaching. He was challenging the entire system that overlooked HBCUs. When Shedeur balled out there, he wasn't just putting up numbers. He was proving that greatness can come from anywhere if given the stage. That's the lens you have to use when looking at their draft day decision. Turning down Baltimore wasn't just about avoiding a backup role. It was about sending a message. The Sanders family refuses to be cast as supporting characters in someone else's story. They want to write the script, not just act in it. That mindset extends beyond football into the way athletes now think about branding, ownership, and independence. Look around the sports landscape. LeBron James didn't just play, he built an empire. Patrick Mahomes isn't just a quarterback, he's a business mogul with ownership stakes. Deion Sanders has always been ahead of that curve, and now Shedeur is stepping into the same lane. By betting on himself, even if it means taking the harder, riskier road, he's aligning with a bigger movement of athletes who refuse to be boxed in by old models. Of course, this isn't without risk. When you play bigger than football, the spotlight gets hotter. Every choice becomes symbolic. Every success becomes a rallying cry, but every failure becomes a cautionary tale. Shedeur's gamble isn't just about his career. It's about whether a new generation of athletes can truly redefine how opportunity works in the NFL. And maybe that's why this story resonates so much. It's not about whether Shedeur will succeed or fail. It's about what he represents. A player raised in prime time's shadow, standing on the edge of tradition and innovation, daring to prove that sometimes football is about more than football. It's about legacy. It's about change. And it's about believing that the biggest wins come when you play the game your way. When the dust settles on all the debate, hot takes, and second-guessing, one truth remains. Shedeur Sanders' future is unwritten. That's both the risk and the opportunity. Right now, his story isn't about where he's been, it's about where he's going. And that future could play out in ways even his critics don't expect. On paper, the decision to turn down Baltimore looks like a missed chance. Who passes up the stability of a world-class franchise and the mentorship of a two-time MVP? But Shedeur's path was never going to be the conventional one. He grew up in the spotlight of prime time, a household where doing things differently wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. His next steps will depend on whether he can turn that inherited confidence into results on the field. The challenge ahead for Shedeur is twofold. First, he has to prove he belongs in the NFL, not just as a backup or project, but as a legitimate franchise quarterback. That means consistency. That means putting in the work behind the scenes when the cameras aren't rolling. That means weathering the inevitable criticism that comes with the Sanders name. The margin for error is slim. One mistake and people will rush to label him as all hype. But if he delivers, if he shows flashes of brilliance and growth, that same spotlight will amplify his success. Second, Shedeur has to carve out his own identity. For all the love and respect Deion gets, being primetime's son comes with baggage. Every decision he makes, every throw he takes, will be compared to the mentality of his father. But Shedeur's future will ultimately depend on him stepping out of that shadow and proving he isn't just carrying on the legacy, he's building his own. If he can blend the fire of prime time with a patient, modern approach to quarterbacking, he could be the perfect hybrid, confident enough to lead, humble enough to grow. The league is always searching for the next big quarterback story. Look at how quickly narratives flip in today's NFL. Brock Purdy went from Mr. Irrelevant to playoff star in one season. Jordan Love spent years waiting and now has Green Bay buzzing again. If Shedeur finds the right situation, his rise could be just as fast, and maybe even more dramatic because of the name attached to him. Here's the real kicker. Shedeur's journey will shape more than just his career. It could set a blueprint for how future quarterbacks handle adversity, draft day disappointments, and the tension between pride and patience. If he succeeds, he'll prove that betting on yourself, even against the odds, is still a winning formula. If he stumbles, it'll serve as a cautionary tale about the dangers of chasing the spotlight before earning the stripes. Either way, Shedeur's story is far from over. The future holds uncertainty, yes, but also massive potential. And for a player raised in prime time's house, uncertainty has never been something to fear. It's been the stage where legends are made. At the end of the day, the story of Shedeur Sanders isn't just about one draft pick, one $400 million opportunity, or one franchise's offer. It's about choice, legacy, and the crossroads every ambitious athlete faces when the safe path and the bold path collide. Shedeur's decision to turn down Baltimore wasn't reckless. It was intentional, a statement rooted in the prime-time mentality of confidence, independence, and refusal to settle for anything less than greatness. This isn't just a family making a decision, it's a lesson in perspective. On one side, there's Baltimore. Stability, mentorship under a generational talent, financial security, and a clear path for long-term growth. On the other side, there's independence, the risk of being undrafted, the pressure to perform from day one, and the challenge of carving a name without leaning on an established superstar. Every athlete at some point faces that crossroads, follow the established route or blaze a new trail. Shedeur's choice shows the courage it takes to take the road less traveled. But courage alone doesn't guarantee success. The NFL is unforgiving, and every choice comes with consequences. Turning down Baltimore means Shedeur must now prove himself in a league where opportunities are scarce and patience is rare. Every snap, every decision on the field, every interaction with coaches and teammates will be scrutinized. The pressure is immense, but if he rises to the challenge, the payoff could be extraordinary. He could redefine how young quarterbacks approach their careers, showing that boldness and belief in oneself can outweigh the safest options. This story is also about evolution. The NFL in 2024 is not the NFL of the 1990s or 2000s. Development paths have shifted, and the old model of learning quietly behind a star isn't the only route to stardom anymore. Shedeur's journey represents a modern approach, one that merges talent, branding, family guidance, and strategic risk-taking. In doing so, it sparks a larger conversation. How do young athletes balance ambition with opportunity, pride with patience, and family influence with personal growth? Ultimately, the Sanders family's decision reminds us that greatness is rarely linear. Some paths are winding, risky, and full of uncertainty. Others are secure, predictable, and laden with guarantees. What defines a player or a legacy is not the path itself, but how they navigate it, what lessons they learn along the way, and whether they have the resilience to thrive when the stakes are highest. Shedeur Sanders' story is far from over. The crossroads he chose to stand at will shape not only his career, but the perception of what it means to chase greatness on your own terms. Whether he becomes the next NFL superstar or a cautionary tale, one thing is certain: the league, the fans, and the sports world are watching closely. And that, perhaps, is the ultimate measure of legacy. Not just the money, the titles, or the stats, but the courage to walk a path that only you can define.
If you enjoyed today's breakdown and want to keep up with all the drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes action in the NFL, then don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and lets us know you love this kind of content. And hey, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, your group chats, or anyone who loves football as much as you do. The more the conversation spreads, the better it gets. Most importantly, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tap the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss when we drop fresh stories, wild rumors, or breaking updates that the mainstream media won't talk about.